Hey there, and welcome to another episode of the Home Tech Podcast. Jason Griffin here. So happy to have you with us. I am joined, as always, by my partner, Seth Johnson. Seth, how's it going?
Good, man. How are you?
I'm doing great. Are you ready for your early morning adventure down to Infocom?
Yeah. That's going to be a long day. I'm driving to Orlando, which is a 2-hour drive, a day at a trade show to mostly work. There's a couple of guys, and anybody listening to the show live, if you're there, I will be there tomorrow and love to meet up. So just let me know. But I know that Bruno is in town, and I know that
right.
Greg is in town, and TJ, of course. I think he lives around Orlando. So we're all going to meet up and have a good time there. And then I've got to turn around and drive back after dinner. So yeah.
So you're not even staying in town for one night?
Nope. No. I just need one day there. Infocom is mostly commercial, and there's not very much home stuff that attaches itself to it. But I need to do some research for work, and it's a good place to go right down the street. So
that's a long day. I think I probably would have opted for a Holiday Inn myself, but more power to you. I hope you enjoy. I look forward to hopefully seeing some pictures of you and the gang. I know that those three gentlemen that you named there are all great supporters of the show, and we really appreciate that. And speaking of that, we want to quickly give a big thanks to everybody who has supported our efforts here at the Home Tech Podcast by visiting our page at HomeTech.fm/support. Once again, that's HomeTech.fm/support. If you're interested in learning more about how you can support our efforts here, go check that out. That's where you can learn about becoming a patron to the show, which is a way you can contribute here for as little as $1 a month. And even at that $1 a month level, we open up access to our private Slack channel, The Hub, which really has turned into a great community. A lot of fun engagement there, and would really welcome more people getting involved in that. So once again, HomeTech.fm/support if you are interested in learning more.
Yep, and we have 2 shout-outs this week for 2 guys, it looks like, that are contributing in a big way. Michael Moore and Carlton Bale both contributed at the $5 and up level. So one of the things you get is a shout-out here on air. So guys, thank you very much. We definitely do appreciate it. And we even had a couple more come on at the dollar level. So thank you as well. We do appreciate it.
Yeah, yep, it's great. We are going to kick around a couple of news stories here, but before we do that, we just want to tease our interview real quick. We had Florian Woess on from Loxone, and a great interview. We've really, behind the scenes, actually been working on getting Loxone onto the show for a while. Just took some time to make schedules line up. If you're not familiar with the technology, it's a very robust home automation company, very on par, I would say, at least from a technological perspective, if not from a U.S. market penetration perspective, very on par with the big players, Control4, Savant, Crestron. Very, very popular system over in Europe, and has a growing operation here in the U.S. and looking to really do more in the market in the years ahead. And Seth, I got to say, I really enjoyed learning more about the product in preparation for the show, really diving into the website, which, as we alluded to in the interview a couple of times, I think is great. Would encourage people to go take a look at that. Looks like a really cool system, and I look forward to seeing what they are able to do in here in the U.S. market.
Yeah, absolutely. This Cedia could be or this year rather could be an interesting year for European technologies coming over into the US. I know that we talked to Chris, and he said that I think HDL was coming into the market. Loxone is here setting up shop, doing what they can do to expand their market. This could be like a European invasion of home automation platforms.
That's right. That's right.
So, I mean, I think it's a good thing. I can't wait to more competition and more space means more innovation for the market in general. So I'm glad to see it.
Yep. So definitely stay tuned for that. Really great interview. Really enjoyed that. But like I said, before we do that, we're going to touch on just a handful of news stories here prior to that interview. So one of the first ones we wanted to kick off here with is a new product from Eero. Now, Eero really kicked off this mesh Wi-Fi craze, which I think, Seth, you and I have talked about, is quickly becoming the new normal in Wi-Fi. But they were one of the first people to come out, at least in this recent sort of trend that we're seeing of very consumer-focused mesh Wi-Fi products. And it looks like they are now ready to push out a second generation of hardware. They've got a couple of different things going on here. They've got one, a product that lives in the same exact physical footprint of the original product, but their touting is double the speed and double the power, and also supports Thread, the home automation protocol. So that sounds like a pretty interesting product.
I am so close to hitting this bell here and calling this a hub. But
it's close.
I can't name one thing that supports Thread other than this Eero thing now. Like, where is Thread? So, I mean, maybe Nest, I guess.
A.W. Rayner in the chat room said he almost passed out when he heard the Thread reference. I think he's saying the same thing you are. We haven't heard much. I think it's interesting that it supports it. I think it speaks to perhaps I would hope at least a vision for the future for Eero to really be more tightly integrated with home automation. But I agree with you. There has not been a lot of movement on the Thread front, and so we'll see how much they're able to really leverage that.
Nice.
So you decided to ring the bell.
I did. I'm sorry. I didn't want to interrupt. I'll go ahead and ring it. I know there's some stuff out that runs Thread, and I'll play nice. So
there's a couple. There's a couple. A couple other layers to this story. They do have a new subscription service, $9.99 a month for Eero Plus. Provides things like parental controls and security services, as well as a secondary type of product called the Beacon, which is a smaller form factor designed to plug straight into an outlet as opposed to having like a power cord on it. Claims that it actually is 20 to 30% better performance than the first generation Eero. So even in that smaller form factor, they're claiming that it's getting better performance than the first generation. So a fairly substantial release here from Eero, and just continuing along that trend of what you, I think, astutely pointed out to me maybe 3 or 4 months ago when we were talking about this mesh Wi-Fi craze, and really pointing out the fact that this is not a trend or a craze anymore. This has become the new normal.
Right. Mesh networking is table stakes. I mean, it's you get that out of the box these days with these. I mean, and these. Let's not poo-poo on this at all. This is a decent product. I mean, all the reviews on Eero are great. The previous one, I'm sure this one, if it's running this much better, this is going to be a great product. So I would wholeheartedly, even with the Thread integration, I would wholeheartedly say this is a great thing to get. And hey, look, it's even one of these that has the $9.99 a month parental controls. Like, where have we heard that? Oh yeah, Securify, who was doing that, I think first, right? And then a whole slew of other companies have come out and announced that they'll be doing some type of monthly parental controls or internet filtering to keep your internet safe on the routers themselves. So I suspect that is the next thing we see pop up with these types of devices is more and more offering parental controls, internet filtering for a monthly fee. Yep. And maybe the price will even come down where they'll start subsidizing the hardware with these monthly costs.
Sort of subscriptions.
Security model. Yep.
Yeah, I would not be surprised to see that. So be cool to watch how that progresses. Moving on here, second story, Logitech Circle 2, a new camera from Logitech. This is they have indoor, outdoor options, weatherproof. They've got wired or wire-free. It's a 1080p camera. Looks like it has night vision, 180-degree field of view, and I believe, if I'm recalling correctly, retail on this thing was about $179 to $199, depending on the options that you select.
And it can be even more because they have some different types of window mounts, or as I like to call it, the creepy shower mount. And they have a weatherproof extension cord. All of these can add up to a replacement rechargeable battery. I mean, this can add up quite a bit between it looks like $20 and $50 or $30 and $50 for every one of these products. So this thing looks nice. in the images and I until you see it like in somebody's hand, you don't realize how big this thing is. I think the wireless one is about 4 inches in diameter, which most of that is, I guess, the battery. But man, this thing looks like a cue ball when you see someone set it down.
I don't know. We were talking about this before the show, and I feel like I need to dig in. There must be 2 different models because, like, I've seen a couple of pictures now of it looks like what's called a plug mount, where it literally just plugs directly into the wall outlet. So there's like not a power cord, and it is smaller in diameter than the width of a standard single gang electrical box. So, you're describing something much bigger. I don't know. There's different models. I think that's actually one of the things that I was reading about this product, and I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing, but it's certainly something that you should consider if you're going to go look at this product. It does appear to have a lot of different options, and so it's not necessarily you buy this one or you buy that one and you're done. It seems to be more intended to give the purchaser some flexibility in terms of, do you want an indoor version, outdoor version? How do you want the power cord? How do you want, X, Y, or Z? And personally, for me, I think that's kind of cool. But for the, very casual technology consumer, could potentially cause, I suppose, a little bit of confusion.
Yep. It does have a number of options that you can get. I don't know. It's not terrible. It does have. I thought this was cool. It has a built-in speaker mic for 2-way audio. So you could potentially use this for something like, I don't know, maybe a baby monitor or something like that. If you wanted to. The app has multiple camera support, which I thought it's always nice to have, and it works on both 2.4 and 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi, which is one of those things you really don't think about until you run into it, and then you realize that you can't connect your new Internet of Things device to the 5 gigahertz. You have to have an old 2.4 Wi-Fi thing laying around and working. So kind of nice that it does both.
Yep, we'll definitely go check that product out if you're in the market for a camera. It appears to be one worth considering. Next story we wanted to jump into here, Savant. This was actually a story came out maybe about a week and a half ago, and we sort of put it on the back burner with all the Apple news last week, but did want to touch on it. They have introduced a wall-mounted touchscreen line. So going back to this has been an ongoing conversation in home technology about the virtues of a dedicated touch panel ever since the days of iPhone and iPad coming out. And I think, the technology that drives these things has commoditized to a point where it's probably relatively inexpensive for a manufacturer to do it. And I think if they can put out a product that works well and has that purpose-built sort of feel and function, why not? I know this was something... I believe we may have even alluded to this briefly back around the Savant Dealer Conference a number of months ago that took place actually here in Denver. I know I had a chance to briefly take a look at this at that conference, and they had a prototype kind of early version there to take a look at. And again, I don't think it's necessarily a bad idea. I know that we on the install side, we were doing less and less of that as far as just having something on the wall, and it was really moving more towards portable devices. And I think even voice is starting now to play into that, where people maybe don't want the wall clutter. So it'll be interesting to see how this does in the market.
Yeah, I think those touchscreens have their place, and when done correctly, and not just haphazardly placed on the wall, can actually add a helpful interface to some situations. Yep. I'm not a big fan of, as you can probably tell, I'm not a big fan of wall clutter and these types of touchscreens on the wall, but I can see, I always would concede to maybe having 1 or 2 of them in important rooms of the house. But these could work out a little bit better, because they're saying that they're starting out with this 5.5 inch version, but there's a 2.9 and an 8 inch version coming later. So a smaller one and a bigger one coming later in the year. And I don't know. I think it could it could work out well. What I'm curious about, Jason, is how the graphics looked on it. Was it kind of like a low res display, or do you remember? Maybe you just saw like a pre-production version.
I mean, to be honest, I don't remember having a strong impression one way or the other. But what I do remember is that they were very, explicit about saying this is a very early version, very much pre-production. So, I wasn't necessarily looking at it through that sort of eye, right? Like the finishes of the product weren't necessarily something that was top of mind. It was more just sort of getting a feel for the overall size and picturing how it would look on a wall and trying to understand overall what the functionality would be.
Right. I'm sure they'll be showing these off later the year at Cedia, and we'll probably get to take a better look at them then.
Yep. Well, jumping to the next story here, very much one I would say for the professional, the dealers in our audience. Cedia building a new headquarters in Fishers, Indiana, and this is a big project. It is definitely making waves, I think, amongst the Cedia base. I'm pulling up the numbers here, Seth. I don't know if you remember them right offhand, but I want to say it was something like $14 million or something along those lines that they were going to $13.7 million that they were going to spend building this place out. And so a lot of details to the story. We'll link to it, HomeTech.fm/166 if you want to read about it. But definitely some interesting comments on this article and a spirited debate about the merits of spending that much money on building a new headquarters.
Yeah. I know that that Cedia has been looking to move their headquarters because of where they were. They needed some maintenance done. They weren't working well with the landlord, or there were some things that had to happen that they were going to have to pay for or something. And this, I don't know, this solution is kind of crazy to me. A $13.7 million facility. It's 40,000 square feet, and in Fishers, which according to some Fox News affiliate is the high-tech hub of Indiana. Okay, well, that's interesting. The price is what just really has me dropping my jaw. I mean, I don't know what the building rates are in Fishers, Indiana. But they actually, the story has a comparison to Stanley Security, who has a building for $15.9 million, and it happens to be double the size at 80,000 square feet. So I don't know. I don't know what to think about this. I don't know if the design that they've chosen, I mean, it's a very modern design. It's a lot of glass on there. I don't know if that's what's running up the cost, but man, this is going to be a very expensive building for the members of Cedia to be, at the end of the day, paying for. Yeah,
it's like you said, I don't know what the real estate there goes for, but it does seem high. It does seem like an extravagant outlay to me on the surface. I know that the counter argument from Cedia is that from a cash flow perspective, it's not going to be that much worse than the lease, and the idea is that they're building an asset, something that they can build equity and own it over time. So that's the counter side of the argument. To me, it does seem excessive. I don't know what the real value. Ultimately, the big question to me is what is the typical Cedia member? What do they benefit from having this versus a something that might cost a third 2 towns over or something, right? So that's the question to me, and it sounds like they're moving forward with this regardless, is the impression I get. It doesn't sound like it's up for a debate or anything like that. It does sound like it's moving forward. So we'll just have to keep an eye on it and see what other information we get, and if it makes the picture a little more clear, we will certainly report on that. One of the last stories here we wanted to touch on before we get into our interview with Florian from Loxone is a story, Seth, that you pulled in from 9 to 5 Mac, and it looks like reportedly Netflix is now has a bigger base than the entire U.S. cable subscriber market. This is according to Leichtman Research, and That's a pretty big statement. I know we've been talking in the weeks and months past about all of the attrition that's going on in the traditional pay TV and cable market, and the fact that Netflix has now surpassed that combined, I guess, as I'm understanding. Hopefully, I'm reading that correctly. Is a pretty significant statement about the future of TV.
Yep. Yeah, and this is this study includes most of the cable providers. It accounts for roughly 95% of all cable subscribers, and slightly less than half of all multi-channel pay TV subscribers. So what I think is interesting here is the trend lines. You can kind of scroll down and see the graphic. One is clearly going up, and the other one is kind of meandering on down.
Yeah.
And I think that's the big story there is one service is definitely a lot more popular with consumers than the other. And I think we're going to keep seeing this. There's so much more that you can get out of these streaming services than you get from cable. And Jason, come on over to the dark side, man.
It's almost time. It's
almost time. Only a couple more months left, and we'll be talking about streaming every week.
Just writing out that contract. To be honest, I got to dig in again and see when it's even up. But yeah, it's looking more. Every week my conviction is growing stronger that the amount of money we're spending for our we have DirecTV here, and the amount of money we're spending is just not worth it for us given our viewing habits and what we watch. I think we'd be much better off evaluating our streaming options.
Yeah, I wonder what cable. I mean, cable is going to react to this at some point in time, and I really wonder in another 5 or maybe even 10 years what a cable company looks like in the U.S. It may very well be that Comcast or Verizon moves off of like their hardware and puts an app on TVs just like Netflix. And that's how you only access cable. Like we wouldn't even think about renting a box from them anymore. They'll probably charge you to rent the app, knowing how these guys work. But I really think that could be what we see one of these days. And I know there are probably some edge cases out there where people don't have access to high speed internet, but at the same time, they probably don't have access to cable services. They're probably using satellite or something like that to get their TV services pulled in. So I think that most cable company subscribers are going to realize how bad of a situation they're in after they start seeing these monthly bills come in, and their neighbors are going to be saying, "Hey, yeah, I'm paying half of that by just using streaming services."
It's going to gain momentum.
Yep.
Totally. All right. Well, let's move on here and get into our interview. Once again, we had Florian Woess on from Loxone, and he is the CEO of the U.S. operations here for the company. And a really great conversation. Learned a lot about the technology and the company, and really look forward to sharing our conversation here with our listeners. So, without further ado, let's get started. Hey, Florian, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you guys?
We're doing great. We're excited to have you on. We have been working behind the scenes for quite some time to get this interview lined up, and I really look forward to the conversation. I've had the opportunity to dive in and really research and learn a lot more about the company leading up to this interview, and I think our readers our listeners, are really going to enjoy it. It looks like Loxone has some really interesting stuff going on in the smart home. But before we dive in and start talking about the technology and learning about the company, why don't you give our listeners just a little bit of a personal introduction and maybe talk about some of your background in the industry?
Sure. So I'm born in Austria. So I'm and I recently moved to the United States. And I have basically been with Loxone since the early days. So I joined Loxone in 2009. For the listeners to know, Loxone is a European-based company, so it's also based in Austria. And we started the company in 2009, and there were the two founders and me and two other guys. So we were a team of 5 people. And in the last, so I've been with Loxone in the last 8 years, and starting from 2009, we basically built it up to the company it is today, which is decent sized company with more than 250 employees worldwide, and we have subsidiaries all over Europe. And I moved to the States last year in order to lead our expansion to the US market.
Awesome. Wow. I didn't realize that you've been there really since the very beginning. That's really cool. I'm sure it's been an interesting journey to see the company. You called it a decent sized company. I would call that a fairly large operation in our industry. I think I saw that on the website, over 250 employees spread out all over the world. And so you guys have clearly had some good success. Why don't you talk a little, you alluded to it there, give us a little bit of an idea about the operations. I know started very much your European company and still have a very big footprint over there. But if I understand correctly, your operations here in the States are still a relatively new endeavor. So give us an idea of the current status of that and what some of your short and long-term goals are here in the States.
Exactly. So let me go back a little on Loxone in Europe. So the whole thing got started by two guys. They're called Thomas and Martin, and they basically built their own home. And what they did is, that was in 2008. And what they did is they put in a system called KNX, which is pretty big in Europe. So it's kind of a system where a couple of different vendors build on the protocols, and they ended up having like a crazy expensive smart home system. They wanted to have a smart home system because both of them are really tech savvy and come from the tech industry, and they were not really happy with it. And they basically built Loxone for themselves at first to have a system in their home. And it worked so well that they decided to we have a business idea here. This is something we can do, and they got the ball rolling. And as you said, 250 employees today, 50 million turnover worldwide right now. So, and when it comes to the US, so we have already been in the US for a while now. So we have a warehouse in Lexington, Kentucky since 2013. Because we already had customers demanding our products in the US, and we already had a couple of installers and integrators who worked with our products, and it was just a pain to get the products to the US. So we rented an office in Lexington, Kentucky, and we have a warehouse there, and we have a small team in Lexington, and since 2013 we did roughly somewhere between 500 and 600 homes that are equipped with Loxone in the US, which is still extremely low compared to the roughly 50,000 homes we have worldwide, most of them in Europe. But still, we did roughly 500 to 600 homes in the US. And last year we sat together and said, it's such a huge market here in the US, and we see the opportunity to grow here and to really make Loxone one of the big players here. So what we did is, what I did is I moved to the US last year in August, and I'm living here since then. And we decided to build up in another location and our new headquarters in Media, Pennsylvania, which is just outside of Philadelphia. And we did also build a show home here, which is kind of exciting because it's, on the one hand, it's a show home. On the other hand, it's also the home I'm living in. So I really have a good feeling for what is going on in the home.
Excellent. That sounds like a lot of fun. And I don't know if you know, but I found out that your Lexington office is actually the old Elan office, the Elan before they were purchased.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's kind of a small industry, and it's crazy that you're hiring there in Lexington, and the people there in Lexington are actually old Elan people. That I don't know. I thought that was pretty cool.
But you know what? The funny thing is, we didn't know that. So seriously, we had no idea that this was the former office of Elan. We learned it like a year later when we actually hired people that were former employees of Elan.
Oh, that's too funny.
So that was kind of a funny coincidence.
Well, touch a little bit on Loxone, the benefits of Loxone that here in the U.S. it's not a common name even for integrators like Jason and myself. You're just now introducing the product to the United States. Tell us what makes Loxone stand out a little bit more than the other popular home automation systems that are on the market.
Sure. So Loxone is a whole home automation solution, just like kind of similar to other solutions that you might that you are familiar with, like Control 4 Savant or Crestron. But we do things very different. So there are a couple of things I want to point out here. So one thing is an idea we called Autopilot Living. And that is all about automation. And I'm talking about real automation here. So we want to make the life of the homeowners easier. So we want to automate as much as possible. So in a Loxone home, usually the lights are fully automated. The HVAC system is automated. The shades are working together with the HVAC system, for example, to prevent the room from overheating or undercooling, to use the sunlight and all that stuff. The security system can activate automatically if there's no motion in the home, stuff like that. And I mean, I'm living in the Loxone home right now. We did here in Philadelphia. And what happens when you live in a Loxone home that uses this idea of autopilot living is that I barely use the app anymore, or I barely use the push buttons, because most of the things I want to do on a daily basis happen automatically anyway. So that's really one of the strong points of Loxone. Another point is that we are serious about this whole home approach. So when I look at some of the other solutions, then I see that they rely heavily on AV and audio video solutions and stuff like that, and maybe have a couple of add-ons, for example, a board with iOS or something like that. And we really want to offer our integrators and our installers a one-stop shop. So everything you might need for doing a smart home, you will get at Loxone. So we have a line of roughly 120 products, and you will get everything from the controllers to dimmers to in-ceiling speakers to also things like accessories like a water contact or a push button or something like that. So it's really a whole home automation solution that covers everything you might need in a home. And the third thing that is pretty unique, I would say, is our software, because we basically have our apps on all the platforms, even on platforms that you might not see with other systems like Windows Mobile or a Mac app or something like that. And the special thing about our software is that it is extremely easy to use, and that our installers and integrators do not need any coding or any programming experience in order to set up a Loxone system or in order to get a house configured. So we really want to make it easy for our professional installers to work with the system.
Very cool. Very cool. I want to loop back a little bit to what you were calling the autopilot living. That sounds extremely interesting. Now, does that mean the Loxone system learns from what you do day to day, and then will try and predict what light you want to turn on at what time?
Not when it comes to the light. So yeah. So what it does is there are different things happening depending on what we're talking about. So for example, for lights, you basically have a motion scene, and this motion scene will trigger once it is dark, but only when it's dark and when you enter the room. but only if the house is not in night mode, because when it's in night mode, it will only trigger a night light or no light at all, depending on what you want. So in terms of that, when it comes to lights or when it comes to music, there's no automation based on your habits. It's more an automation based on things like motion or presence. When it comes to HVAC, for example, there is logic, and for example, the system basically learns your habit and learns the room. So it learns, okay, the system knows, okay, I need, let's say I need roughly 2 hours to cool down the bedroom, and it will act accordingly. So if, for example, if I set up, okay, I want to have 68 degrees at 8 p.m., then it will start early to have the right temperature at 8 p.m. and not like start cooling at 8 p.m. but have the right temperature at 8 p.m. So in that regard, it's also a learning system. And yeah, I mean, depending on different, depending on your preferences. For example, what I always love, one of the things I love in the home is when I enter the bathroom in the morning, it will automatically play my morning playlist. So that is one thing I really enjoy. Or we have this nice like chirping birds. If you go on the toilet, there's like a chirping bird sound through the speakers, which everyone that kind of each time I make a tour through the home and somebody enters the toilet, that's kind of wow. That's kind of that kind of always flashes them.
Well, Seth gets the sounds of birds chirping when he just opens his garage. He's down there in Florida, and we're often battling with with the birds chirping. Longtime listeners to our show will be familiar with that. It's funny that came up, kind of an inside joke. Okay, cool. So this is actually, I think, a good time to talk about software. You alluded to it a little bit, but a lot of what you've been talking about is, it sounds like it's very directly related to how the system is programmed. You know, there are ways to do these sort of automations and autopilot type functions in a lot of different smart home systems. But the impression that I'm getting from listening to you talk about it is that really the Loxone system is making it easier from a programming perspective, has a lot of this stuff maybe built in and has thought about it in a different way that makes it easier to implement, perhaps, if I'm understanding that correctly. So talk about the Loxone software specifically from a programming perspective is what I'm curious to know. How does that environment work?
Exactly. So what I didn't mention before is that in order to make this easy, so we have a specific idea and a very strong idea about how a smart home should work. So we have clear recommendations for everything. We have clear recommendations on how a push button should work, on how light should be automated, on how the HVAC system should work and all that stuff. And we basically, when you get a Loxone smart home, and when you configure the smart home, we always talk about configuring because you don't need any coding, you don't need any programming for the integrator. It's a drag and drop interface. But a very, very strong and very feature-rich drag-and-drop interface, so also with possibilities to do some logic and all that stuff. But the exciting thing about it is that this software, and the name of the software is Loxone Config, and when you do a house as a Loxone installer, you basically add all the devices in the home, then you name all those devices, you add the devices to a room and to a category. And then there's one of our biggest features, so to say, is what we call the Autopilot Configurator. And what it does is it will set up all push buttons in the home, all lights in the home. It will add like the motion light scene and so on. According to our recommendations, automatically through the whole home. It will also add some whole home functionality, like the intercom functionality if you have an intercom, or the alarm functionality if you have an alarm system. And that happens fully automatic. It's a one-click thing. It takes a couple of seconds, and you basically have a basic configuration in the whole house ready in a couple of minutes. And from there, you adapt it and you personalize it. And that is the whole idea. So with that approach, we really speed up the time an integrator needs to basically configure a home a lot.
Okay, cool. So a couple sort of follow-up questions to that. One of them, a very quick one, is the programming software like a Windows specific or Mac, or is it a web-based thing? How does that work?
It's a Windows software, so it's Windows specific.
Okay, got it. And then, coming off of that as well, a couple of questions here on the end user side. So I think you alluded to it briefly earlier. I just want to make sure that we touch on it for our listeners. So two-part question: the end user app that the user of the home, controls the home with. Is that available on iOS and Android?
Yep. So it's available on iOS, Android, and Windows.
And Windows Phone. Okay, great. And then the last question on the... Go ahead.
Yeah, and we do also have a Mac app. So like a native Mac app. That's
running. Oh, nice. Yeah.
With some additional features, which is kind of cool because you basically can use the app running on your Mac. For example, if you have a home office and you have the Mac app running, it will also act as a presence sensor and say, okay, you have the Mac app running, so you are present. Your commute is active, so it will also act as a presence sensor.
Nice. Okay, and then the last question, specifically on the programming side, does the end user have any access to programming on their own in general? Are they able to do scene configuration, anything like that?
So there are two things. So we always think in order to have it easy to use for the end customer, but also to not have the Loxone installer and Loxone integrator have to go to the home and get the truck rolling each time there is a request or something like that. We do have some functionality. So the homeowner is able to set up light scenes, music scenes, music playlists, and a couple of different things that are kind of basic that you might want to change from time to time. And there's another thing that an integrator can essentially activate or not for the homeowner, and that is the Autopilot generator. And the Autopilot generator is an interface within the app where you can create events like when the sun goes down, activate the alarm system, or activate this specific light scene that controls the auto lights and stuff like that. So the Autopilot Configurator is kind of a thing for more advanced homeowners, more advanced users to be able to do more without an integrator. But essentially, you need admin rights, and you need the integrator can basically decide if he wants to give the homeowner a user or the full admin access.
Very cool. Well, I know that there's a lot of angst out there sometimes when some of these end users that I had as customers could easily program the system, and in fact did program their systems better than I could, simply for the fact that they were in the house and using the home automation system and able to understand their exact needs. I wouldn't know what to do unless I was living in their house 24/7. And I can only guess at how they want to have their lighting scenes done. So I think it's great you guys do that. I think it's great to have that option.
Maybe what we always do about that one. So we always recommend our partners and installers, when we do a training, we always recommend them to basically go back to the homeowner's house after 3, 4, 5 weeks in order to talk to them and to see, okay, is everything working as they expect, and do they want to change anything? Because what we found is that homeowners have to live in their homes if it's a newly built home, they have to experience it like a couple of weeks till they exactly know, okay, is this working for me, or do I need to have anything changed here? And it's even a requirement. If you want to become like a Loxone, a higher tier partner, like a gold and platinum partner, we also talk to the homeowners and basically ask them the question, hey, did they come back after within 2 months to check the system and see if everything is working towards how you expect it to work?
Sure. Makes sense. All right. Well, we've talked a lot about the software. Let's look at some of the hardware, and let's start with the brains of the operation. As I understand it, you guys have 2 different processors. There's a Loxone mini server, and then the mini server Go. So give us an overview of those.
So the mini server and the mini server Go are basically the heart of the smart home installation. This is where all this is where the configuration is stored, where the statistics are stored. So when you configure a home, you basically connect to the mini server, and also with the app you connect to the mini server. So this is kind of the heart of the system. The difference between the two is kind of simple. So the mini server is the device you probably use in a newly built environment, because it has it goes to the panel, and it has inputs and outputs to directly connect things like has a couple of relays to connect things like lights or shades or something like that. And the mini server Go is more for retrofit products, because it has our Loxone Air technology built into the mini server, so to say. I mean, you can do both things. You can mix and match them. You can also add what we call an air-based extension to the mini server in order to have wireless. But like the go-to product for a newly built home is the mini server, and the go-to product for a retrofit is the mini server Go.
I do have one quick question about the mini server. Does it need to have like internet access to work, or is everything controlled from the mini server itself? How does that work?
So our main philosophy and our idea is that we want to keep everything in the house. So actually, the mini server does not require an internet connection, and the mini server does not connect to any cloud servers. So the system runs on its own in the house. So we talked to a lot of homeowners that are kind of concerned about privacy and things like that. And we have a solution that is basically cloud free. So all the data is stored on the mini server, even statistics and like the logic, like the heating logic and calculations on that. So everything is happening on the mini server. There's nothing that it gets sent to the cloud or sent back to Loxone or something like that to do anything with the data of the homeowner. So yeah, it's cloud free.
Excellent. And I noticed also on the website, I mean, security is a big deal these days. I noticed you had a bullet point that said you developed your own operating system for this. Like it's not using Linux, or it's not using embedded Windows XP or something that's going to get hacked and you held for ransom by ransomware. How does that's got to be a good feature of the system?
Yeah, so I mean that's more of like a tech detail, but what we when we started up in 2009, we kind of went with putting Linux on the board first, and there was just too much overhead, and we basically have this crazy software engineer that is like has like 40 years of software development experience from scratch, and he basically said, okay, I mean, I can do it myself. I can write my own file system. I can write my own kernel. I can do all that and really tailor it to the smart home, so to say, and get rid of all the overhead, and that's what he did. And that is also something that helps us till this day, because when we introduced the mini server, in 2010 we went on the market with the mini server, and still today you get software updates for the main mini server. It's the device that is 7 years old still gets the latest software, because it's just tailored to our system, and it doesn't rely on like a Linux kernel or something like that may be outdated or may have security glitches or something like that.
Got it. That makes sense. And so let's talk about Loxone Air in general. I know that is a something that was relatively prominent on the website, and it looks like a line of solutions really built around wireless technology and targeted very specifically at the retrofit environment. So give us an overview of that product line, and also talk generally about the importance, as you perceive it, of having a good set of wireless retrofit solutions.
So our most important business, or our most important aim is to go into the newly built home. And we see wireless solutions as a great add-on. We are talking about wireless push buttons, wireless remotes. an IR controller that you can put behind the TV or that you can put to your AV system or something like that. So we have a line of retrofit products with Loxone Air, and we mostly use them as add-ons to our newly built installations. But we do also have a lot of customers out there that use them just to make like a partial smart home solution in order to automate different things like controlling the lights in an apartment or controlling the TV in an apartment. But our main thing is for Loxone Air is really to have add-ons to our in a Loxone home, to have an easy way to have add-ons, so to say. And the Loxone Air solution in itself is pretty unique because it's one of the few wireless solutions out there that, from a technical perspective, can do both mesh, and it is also a bi-directional protocol that can talk back and forth to the devices, and it's fully updatable. So even if we want to roll out the firmware update to a wireless device, it will also do that. So it's pretty advanced technology that is super reliable. And it's kind of an add-on. We see it's kind of an add-on to our existing line. And there is also... Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Okay. And besides that, so there are basically two core technologies of Loxone. So there's the air technology, which is our wireless technology, and the other core technology is what we call tree technology. And the tree technology is our hardwired solution, so to say. And we use that technology to basically enable installers to easily and fast wire things like the push buttons and RGBW dimmers, motion sensors, and things like that. And we build it in a way that basically it's like a tree. So you have the tree extension, which is kind of the core of the whole thing. And then you go out with different branches to the different rooms, and you basically daisy chain all the products to it. Then you go to the software, you hit search, all the products will be listed, and they're ready to go. So it's a technology that we introduced, I think, 2 years ago to again make an installation even more straightforward than it already is, and even easier from a configuration standpoint.
Yeah. One of the benefits I saw associated with that, I thought it was interesting, and I'm glad it came up. I wanted to make sure that we hit on it. On the website, I think it says, this technology is designed to reduce the amount of wiring needed in the home. So essentially, I guess maybe like a daisy chainable technology, but it seemed to be a little bit more than that. So talk for just another minute about the technology specifically from a wiring perspective. I mean, how is this different from quote unquote traditional smart home wiring? So
it's flexible. So you can do a star wire, you can do a line, with branches. So it's pretty flexible when it comes to laying out the system. And it's also like I said, you don't have to. We build it in a way that you, as an installer, you don't have to like go to each device and kind of activate it. You just connect. So it basically has 4 wires, two wires for 24-volt power, 2 wires for communication, and you basically daisy chain all the products to it. And then you hit search in the configuration software, and everything is there. So no need to kind of activate the push button, activate the motion sensor or something like that. It's just there, and you assign it to a room, to a category. Let me say, you might ask, okay, how can I know which product is that particular product? So what happens is, for example, if this is listed in the search and I click on the push button makes a click sound, so that I know, okay, this is that specific push button I'm addressing at the moment. So, So we put a lot of energy into making it super easy and super straightforward for the installer.
Very cool. Yeah, I don't want to compare you to the KNX, but it sounds very similar to the way I think I remember that programming and setting up. Except it sounds a lot better and easier.
So yeah, so the difference is when you in a KNX environment, you basically have to lay out the system, and each device So some of those devices have a learn button, some have not in the KNX environment, and you basically have to give an address to each device manually.
Yeah.
So you assign an address to each device, and then you say, okay, this push button should switch this light from this address to this address and stuff like that. And that's not how Loxone works. So Loxone is kind of different because you have the central mini server, and the mini server makes the decision. In a KNX environment, you're basically limited to the capabilities of the single devices. In a Loxone system, you're basically not limited by devices. More like you can do whatever the mini server. You press a push button, you get a signal. You can do anything with it, basically, because the mini server, everything is hooked up to the mini server, and the mini server decides what to do with it, so to say. So it is very different from a configuration standpoint. From a wiring standpoint, it is kind of similar. Yeah.
Yep. Very nice. Well, that sounds like a dream, actually, compared to setting up a KNX system. So let's kind of go back a little bit and talk about hardware again. I keep kind of looping back to it. But one of the things you mentioned, and it's prominently displayed on your website, is how many products you have. We've only really talked about the mini server itself, and then a couple of modules for maybe the air modules. But what like, you have lighting, you have shading controls, you have HVAC controls, one wire, dolly, RGBW, like you were talking about. There are a ton of things you can do off of the mini server, and in those little modules, you just add them on. Is that how that works?
So I talked about the two core technologies before, and besides those core technologies, we have something what we call the extensions. And what we do with those extensions and with the products, with the accessories we have additionally, is we basically expand the system with different communication interfaces. So to give an example, we have an extension for DMX, we have an extension for DALI, for one wire, for RS-232, RS-485, and so on. So there's a whole line of interfaces you can use with the system. So for example, if you want to integrate DALI lights, or if you want to talk to music system through RS-485, you can do that with our extensions. And that is just so Loxone. The idea behind this is Loxone is not a closed system. So we have a whole range of our own products, and we have our own technologies with tree and air, but we also have a whole line of interfaces to talk to third-party devices, and also we do also have accessories for a couple of those interfaces, like one-wire temperature sensors, or an iButton, or DMX dimmer. And we do also, one thing I forgot, I always forget to mention, we do also have, I talked about the mini server, I talked about the core technologies, but one essential product we do also have is a music server, our own Loxone music server, which is basically a multi-room audio system that is tightly integrated into the smart home, and that is part of the whole Autopilot living idea. So, for example, when you ring the door, and then the ring sound comes through the speaker, and when the garage door is open at night, you can have text to speech through the speakers and stuff like that. So that's kind of our idea of how to use a multi-room audio system beyond music, but also for like smart home applications.
Right. Yeah, I think that like Seth said, we sort of jumped right into software and wiring, but it sounds like those are some of the things that really make your product stand out. And as far as specific product categories, you guys have a ton. I got to say, I even sent Seth a message this week when I was researching, and said, man, you got to go check out the website. It's fantastic. Really enjoyed the website. Would encourage anybody listening to go check that out if they want to get a better feel for the breadth of this product and the different subsystems that you guys cover. It's very comprehensive, and I think the website does a really good job of conveying that. It's really everything from lighting and shades or blinds, as it's called on the website, energy solutions, audio, security, HVAC. So it's a very, very comprehensive system, and like I said, would encourage people to go check that out. We are running a little bit tight on time, and so I want to zoom out a little bit and talk about sort of market strategy. Or is Loxone using a traditional, like when you guys come to the U.S. here specifically, and maybe even talk about how you do it in Europe as well, if there are differences there we should know about. Are you guys working with a traditional sort of smart home integrator distribution channel, or maybe a slightly more wide than that? Do you work with electricians, builders, developers? What is your go-to-market strategy?
So our traditional, we call it the Loxone partner. So our traditional Loxone partner is either a custom integrator or an electrician. And we work with integrators, installers, electricians. And I mean, one thing that is unique to the US is that when you look at Loxone as a solution, and when you compare it to other solutions that are out there, so there are a lot of luxury home solutions out there, and we really want to go. Loxone is not a luxury only product. We really want to enable our integrators and our partners to go for the mid-end market. Just how the way the system is priced and the features it has, it just makes sense. Even if you don't have like a crazy expensive home or like a home theater or something like that. So we have the system ready for the mid-end market, and what we see is that in order to get into the mid-end market, we do also have to connect and to talk to the builder, because in a lot of, and that is a key difference from Europe to the US, or specifically from the German markets to the US market, because in the German markets you often see that the homeowner is basically the decision maker. So it's not like a typical setup where like a builder builds a community with 50 homes or something like that and sells it to the homeowner. It's usually a custom home project is kind of the norm in the German markets. And that way it's always pretty straightforward to go into, if the homeowner wants Loxone, or if he has an electrician or an integrator that works with Loxone, he will get Loxone. In order to enable that in the US, in the mid-end market, we do also have to talk to builders, and that's what we do here. So we work with, but it always has to be professionally installed. So what we basically do is we connect our Loxone partners with builders. And so we do cooperations with builders and then get our partners to do the actual installation, because at the end of the day, it has to be professionally installed.
Got it. That makes sense. So definitely don't need specific pricing here or a ton of detail, but you sort of alluded to it there, and I just want to make sure we touch on it directly. I saw it sort of prominently displayed on the website that really one of the core missions of Loxone is to make this technology approachable for a broad range of the market and not just be a luxury solution. And so to that end, how do you guys stack up on price point relative to other competitive solutions in the market?
I do not have like direct comparisons. I mean, I can only I can give an example of the home I'm living in. So when you talk about a fully equipped Loxone home, like we have it here, where you have LED spots. So we have 200 LED spots here. We have built-in speakers in every single room. We have push buttons in every single room. We have an HVAC system fully controlled with our dampers to control the airflow individually, all that stuff. So it's like a full-fledged Loxone home. And when it comes to the hardware point of view, it's about like it's an investment of 20 to 25K in hardware to have like the full feature set in the home. And
wow. That's very competitive.
It is.
That's very competitive. I would say, like to somebody listening out there who may be coming from the DIY side or doesn't really maybe hasn't gone out and shopped professionally installed systems before, may not seem like or it may seem like a very high number, but that's a very competitive price point, and definitely wasn't intending. There are a lot of variables that go into this, clearly, and so more generally, we were just trying to gauge, where Loxone falls on the general spectrum, and it sounds like you guys are a very price competitive solution, and like I said, it seemed to be a core message that I saw on the website.
I mean, you had. I remember you had Chris Gamble here last September or something like that on the show. You had him here this year, but last year he said something on the show. He said he was trying out Loxone Air and Crestron Ping, and at the end of the day, he can do the same thing with Loxone at half of the price, to give you an idea.
Yeah. Well, that was the impression I got.
I don't want to name somebody, but this is kind of. I'm just repeating what I heard. So.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair. We'll take it. We're just trying to get a general sense. So I think that gives us a good idea, and I think it sounds like a very compelling product from that standpoint. And so one last question here, then we'll wrap things up. There may be a lot of listeners here in the U.S. I know I'm one of them here, a person here in the U.S. who's curious to know, will you guys be at Cedia this year in San Diego?
So I actually had Wim Bruno here last September when he still was the CEO of Cedia, and I talked to him about that. So what I decided for myself is that I will be at Cedia this year. So I will go to the show and experience the show myself. But this year we won't have a booth or something like that. So I want to see it myself and experience it because, I mean, we, as a company, to be honest, we are not a big fan of exhibitions. We basically see our main marketing channel online. So we're basically not a big fan of that. But I see that Cedia is just hugely. Cedia in general is just a hugely important channel for us, and we are also members, and we do work with the guys, and I had a great relationship with Win. So I'm gonna have a look at Cedia this year, and then decide on what we will do for next year. So what I didn't want to go to Cedia this year with like a small booth or something like that, because when we go to a show, we want to have something big.
Very cool. Well, we'll hopefully get to meet up with you when we head out to San Diego later this year. And like Jason was saying, if you're listening to this and you're curious about Loxone, I guarantee you'll find more information on your website there, Loxone.com. Then you may be able to pick up at a trade show. That your website, whoever's done that, you guys have done a great job of putting that together. Florian, thanks so much for coming on the show and chatting with us about Loxone. If somebody wants to, I may have given this away, but if somebody wants to reach out and learn a little bit more, where should they go?
Yeah, so check out the website. We have a lot of possibilities to connect through the website. Just send us a request and we'll get in touch with you. You can also connect directly with me through LinkedIn. We have a Facebook channel. We have a Twitter channel. So we are open to all sides, so to say. So go check us out and get in touch with us if you want to learn more. Get in touch with us if you want to get started as a Loxone partner. We are looking for partners all through the United States in order to expand our business here. I mean, we do have more customer requests than we have partners, which is a great thing, but we need more partners in order to be able to get those homeowners taken care of.
Very good. Well, Florian, thanks so much for coming on the show. We'll talk to you later.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Florian.